Welcome to another Corner Booth podcast here at Greenspot Restaurant. I'm Aaron Rand, along with Bill Brownstein, Lesley Chesterman, and our special guest today, Martine St-Victor. Martine, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I want to thank our sponsors, the folks at Empire Gold and Guaranteed Industries, for making this all possible. So let's jump right in. Election's over.
Yes.
If you can, biggest surprise, biggest disappointment in this election?
Biggest disappointment is the kind of media coverage that each of the candidates got. I cannot believe Éric Duhaime got so much media coverage, that the coverage wasn't tougher. So that's the biggest disappointment, because I've seen this movie before. I've seen it in the United States with Donald Trump and other right-wing candidates. I've seen it in France with Éric Zemmour. And so we're normalizing these guys. And that's the result. Well, he wasn't elected, but he could have been elected, and I think that would have been catastrophic.
I'm going to stop you there. There are a lot of people, as it turns out, even in the Anglo community, who thought he might be a good alternative vote. It didn't turn out that way for Liberals. They ended up winning Montreal, but they liked what Éric Duhaime had to say. You're making it seem like he's a bit of a pariah. Why did we even listen to him? What part of that were you most fearful of?
So a few years ago, when he was a very influential radio host in Quebec City, he said a couple of things that I will never let go of. One of the things he said was that the black community didn't have many heroes, and when they do have heroes, they turn into zeros. There's no way I'm going to forget that. And he never tried to sincerely apologize for that. He never tried to make it better. I think people have the right to make mistakes, but I think they have to try to make it better. He never tried to do that. He made light of rape. He compared rape to car theft. And he suggested that the Conseil du Statut de la Femme be abolished. So I don't have tolerance for that. I think he has the right to his opinions. I don't have to like it, and I don't think it's undemocratic to be critical of people like that who are running for office.
So why did he get so much attention and Dominique Anglade did not get that same kind of... She got more scrutiny than she got attention.
She got more scrutiny because she's a woman. She got more scrutiny because she's a black woman. You can speak to any child of immigrants, regardless of their color, and they will tell you that they were raised knowing very well that they had to be twice as good. Every child of immigrant, regardless of origin, knows this. This is how we are raised, because we know that the lens on us is going to be tougher, thicker. Things are going to be more difficult. That's the way it is. And also, I think with Éric Duhaime, there is the rise of the right. I know it gets a lot of clicks. I was speaking before about France. When you look at the media coverage that Éric Zemmour got, it is absolutely ridiculous. He ended up with 11% of the vote at le premier tour in France at the last presidential election. But when we make light of these people, like when Donald Trump went on Jimmy Fallon in 2016, Jimmy Fallon tried to normalize Donald Trump.
When he played with his hair?
Played with his hair and then made light of so many things that he had said. Jimmy Fallon apologized months later because he realized that he was feeding the machine. Now, why did Éric Duhaime get this? What's this percentage? 16%? You said, Aaron? 17%?
No, not even.
Just at around 15,
No. He got the least.
Less than that.
He got like 14.
Yeah,
or
14% of the popular vote.
13 even.
So the easy way the lazy way to explain why he got so many votes is, and I've heard it so many times, is to say he tapped into the anger of people. Look, everybody's angry. And I get it. You know, I'm angry because my mom is 72 and I don't know if she'll be, I don't know what's going to happen to her when she's 79, when she's 85. I don't know, because the help for the elderly is not as good as it should be. I'm angry because my family doctor is about to retire in December, and I don't know how and when I'm going to get another family doctor. Everybody's got issues, and I get it, and everybody's been let down by politicians.
But why did nothing stick to Éric Duhaime? All the stuff you said about his days as a radio host, he said some pretty outrageous and outlandish things. That didn't seem to stick with people.
Because we've normalized him. Why haven't the anti-immigration comment stuck to Minister Boulet, former Minister Boulet? Because we've normalized these guys, we've normalized these comments. We're not shocked by anything anymore. That's on us. That onus is on us.
I think there are two sides to this. First of all, is that let's never forget there are some people who are very happy to hear what Éric Duhaime had to say. As much as there are a lot of people who love hearing what Trump has to say. So for us, we can say we're normalizing, but a lot of people cheered him on. Secondly, I think with Dominique Anglade, I think she was really reviled by the press, or maybe she had a lot of problems because she was the leader of a party that a lot of people didn't like to begin with. You know, I live with somebody who always votes PQ. Don't even mention the Liberal Party in my house. It could be run by, Ernie and Bert, and he'd still hate it. It's not only who she is, it's the party she was heading. So let's not always make this so personal. It also has to do with what the Liberal Party still represents for a lot of Quebecers, So there's that too. It's not just her. It's the Liberal Party as well.
I agree, full stop.
Right.
I agree about that. My beef with the media coverage is not the political coverage. If you look at the CBC and Radio-Canada, they have norms. Every candidate has to get the same percentage of media coverage, fine. I'm very disenchanted with the El Quebecs and the El Canadas of this country, please, they do not have the same standards when it comes to coverage percentage. Why wasn't Dominique Anglade on the cover of El Quebec, of Chatelaine, of El Canada, Chatelaine in French, Chatelaine in English? Why is that? Why wasn't she why wasn't there a profile of her in the Globe and Mail when there was a profile of her, a profile of Éric Duhaime? So all these things don't add up. And when Hillary Clinton became head of the Democratic Party, did you see the number of articles about this here in Canada? Did you see the number of articles when Kamala Harris made it to the VP position in the States?
Well, then let me ask you the question. So you pointed out, you're asking the question why. What's the answer to why?
I think part of it is that, and my problem is with feminists here in Canada. And I say that as a feminist. So I think before we saw her gender, we saw her race. And it doesn't mean that I'm calling these people racist. I'm saying that it was yet another barrier. And we have to call these things out. For me, Dominique Anglade, and in all transparency, she's my friend. I've known her for years. I sit on the board of the foundation she co-founded. But for me, Dominique Anglade crystallizes what Quebec does best. Why? She was born here. Her father co-founded UQAM. She went to HEC and she went to Polytechnique, two of Quebec's greatest learning institution. She crystallizes what Quebec does best. Stay here, go to our schools. And then she got some experience in Ontario, she came back. She stayed here. She headed Montreal International, put it back on the map. So I don't know why we're not applauding her more than we are now.
Well, this raises a question, though. Is it ever going to be possible for a black woman in Quebec to be a leader, to be the premier?
I think so.
But
I think so. And I have to tell you, when she was named Deputy Premier of Quebec and when she was named Minister of the Economy, I wrote an op-ed in the Montreal Gazette to say it's fantastic that no big deal was made about her race and her gender.
Right.
And at the time, I did believe that. Today, the reason why it would be important to mention that she's a woman from immigration, it's because immigration is being attacked.
Right.
It's because it's tougher for women in politics today here in Quebec. They get threats. They get all types of threats from other politicians and from electors. So here's this woman who had all these hurdles. Today in 2022, because it's harder, no celebration.
But don't you think also with Dominique Anglade, it might also have to do the fact that there wasn't a leadership race? So she was kind of appointed. Also, the pandemic played a lot in that we were so distracted by everything else that we don't want to see 20 questions with Dominique Anglade in El Quebec. I think that we don't know a lot about her, but there is something also about her that I'm speaking honestly. I don't know her. I admire her, absolutely. But there's something a little bit frosty. There's something a little bit cold. And maybe it is the women who are trying to be so professional or how do women even react in politics? You know, like
Right.
I remember a very famous politician telling me at a dinner party, women make terrible politicians because when they stand up and speak in the House of Commons, they have terrible voices. And I looked at him and I thought, is that what it's down to? That, you know, so it's very hard when women don't have role models to see who they should emulate. And I always found she's a little bit of an enigma because it's hard to figure her out.
Well, she's an enigma because media don't cover her enough, right? So she started. So I agree that the fact that there was no real race for the PLQ leadership. She had an opponent. He pulled out. This is how fabulous she is. This is how formidable she is. That people realized didn't stand a chance. We need to applaud that as well. I think women do have role models in politics. There are plenty of role models. Quebec did have a woman premier that beyond, above political ideologies, she was a woman who, and 4 or 5 kids, went through all these ministries, made so many changes, structural changes in Quebec politics. I'm not a fan of the PQ, but I can recognize what she brought to Quebec society. That being said, there are plenty of women who can be models in not only in Quebec politics but in Canadian politics. I think your comment about her being frosty is an example of what's so hard about being a woman in politics.
Right.
Because I can name you 15 men politicians who have the charm of a prison door.
Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
I was at a meeting the other day. Someone told me I saw Dominique Anglade yesterday at the Chamber of Commerce. My God, she's fantastic. I wonder if her beauty is not a hurdle.
Right. Wow.
People used to say of Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany, we wish she was more coquette. Okay, which one is it? Do you want
and Robert Barrasso was not dancing on tables. Let's be honest.
Yes, and so I think I think the difficulty is because there are not enough women in position of leadership in politics, so we don't know how to receive them, how to cover them, how to speak about them. We don't know.
Yet Francois Legault made a point just the other day of saying, look at my elected officials. There are more women in this government than there have ever been before.
Okay, you know what? Let François Legault appoint a woman Minister of Finance, Minister of Economy, Minister of Health, and then I can believe what he's saying. For now, all these big portfolios are by older men, and stop giving women culture and blah blah blah. Give them give them the big ones, and then we can talk.
Anglo relations.
Yeah, I can have that position. I'll do it. I would actually do it very well.
Yeah.
So I asked you at the outset, surprises and disappointments. You mentioned Éric Duhaime and all the coverage he got. What was the big surprise? I can't imagine it was the CAQ winning by the margin of victory they did, because we all assumed that was going to happen.
And we called it at 8:08.
Yes.
Yeah. No. So the big surprise for me, because believe it or not, despite all my many rants since the beginning of this interview, I do see the flute half full. That's the type of person I am. I am very enchanted by the youth in this election. Many candidates who are in their 20s, 30s. I was listening to a candidate who's 19 who lost, but she said, I'll be back. I'll be back in 4 years. That gives me energy. I love it. I love driving in the streets of Montreal, looking at the election posters, seeing diversity. That is the Quebec I know. This is the Quebec I love. This is, and then it gives me hope. And this is true of all the parties. I don't know about Parti conservateur. I don't care. I don't know what their makeup is, but Parti québécois, Québec solidaire, Parti libéral du Québec, Coalition Avenir du Québec, Coalition Avenir du Québec, all had diverse candidates, and I think that's fantastic.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by Guaranteed Industries. They are a Lennox premier dealer. They can take care of all your heating or cooling needs, residential, industrial, or commercial. GuaranteedIndustries.com, or call them at 514-342-3400. They are a Lennox premier dealer. How much of a surprise, or not how much of a surprise, was it that the new parties, the Canadian Party, Bloc Montréal, didn't really manage to achieve very much, or did they?
No.
Not in my book, but the fact that they can exist needs to be applauded. That the democratic process and exercise is so accessible that new parties can emerge. So we have to applaud that.
Well, one of the
there's
things
also
they-
something made,
Yeah.
just with respect to that about Montreal. I'm starting to hear that now more from people. We know what happened with Liberal Red in Montreal. People saying this has come up before. If Quebec can separate from Canada, can Montreal separate
Oh
from
my
Quebec?
God, I would run for president of Montreal. Or, yeah.
Well, it's got
Can
to
it be done?
I don't know if it, no. The answer is no.
It's
It
got to
can
be
done.
disastrous when you look. I saw a statistic that of the 29 people elected in Montreal, 28 were not CAC. Outside of Montreal, the number was astounding.
Yeah.
I mean, it's two different worlds. Terry Mosher Aislinn had a terrific cartoon today.
Yeah.
Montreal and then
Yeah.
Legauville.
So I'm very conflicted with the results. I can read, I saw the results, and the reason why I'm conflicted is because I was born in Trois-Rivières, lived there until I was 9. My parents immigrated from Haiti in 1965 or 1966. We could not have a better upbringing in Trois-Rivières. This is my vision of les régions. My uncle and aunt arrived in La Tuque from Haiti in 1966. They had a great life, and so on and so on and so on. So it's very difficult for me when I hear les régions being painted as
Right. I
these
absolutely
racist.
agree with you.
I
Yeah.
think it's unfair.
Yeah.
But if it's unfair, how does someone like Jean Boulet, having said what he said,
And win so
by a
handily
landslide?
in
Yeah.
How is
Trois-Rivières.
that
I know.
possible?
I don't know, but I don't like it. And to come back to Dominique, what I know is that she did this work of visiting les régions. As soon as she became, even before she became leader of the PLQ, she did the work. She loved it, and she used to come back with the same comment saying, you know, everybody says now that we know you, we like you. But les régions are not these, you know, racist-filled, disconnected places. They are not. So it's very difficult for me to reconcile
But that's
the
his
numbers.
base, and that he plays these anti-immigration views to that base
Yeah.
who respond.
I know and I was reading in the New York Times, there was this profile about l'Assomption last week.
Right.
This portrait of l'Assomption, and you had this woman who said, well, you know, the immigrants, they want to come here and take away our crucifix. Well, I'm Catholic. I go to church every other week. I haven't seen a tremblay in there in a very long time. So I don't think the problem is the immigrants when it comes to the Catholic religion. So they have all these ideas. Some of them have these ideas. But the reason why l'Assomption was profiled is because you have these new immigrants bringing restaurants, bringing, you know, different types of foods, etc., changing the makeup of the city and for some of the region. And for some people, that's great. But for many others, it's like, whoa, too many changes. So I just don't like the regions being painted as these terrible, horrific places.
So
They're not.
strategically, if Dominique Anglade went to these regions, as you said she did, and came back feeling good about the fact that she connected, at the end of the day, they didn't vote Liberal. Why?
Yeah, not yet. This work, in my view, this work never ends. You know, I was asked once what's going to change in the way elections are done, in the way politics are done. And I go, I'm not sure. I know social media has changed a lot of things. And now you have micro-targeting, and that changes a lot the way people campaign. But if there's one thing that will never change, is door-to-door. You have to hit the ground, grassroots, that will never change. So you don't go to Ile de la Madeleine once. You go 20 times. That's the work. That's the
Look
hustle.
at Hillary
That's
Clinton. She didn't go to Wisconsin, right? And was,
Right.
You know,
Famous
Right.
line, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So you think strategically, if you had to pick a mistake in the election, who made that mistake?
I don't know. I don't want to point fingers. I think what I don't like is when politicals have said, well, you know, Pierre Saint-Paul Plamondon had a perfect campaign and Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois had a perfect campaign. Really? They said the N-word in front of a black woman on live television.
Yeah.
That's a perfect campaign. So I want us to raise standards, right? I want us to expect better of our politicians.
But in much, it's funny you say that, because in much the same way when that came up, that N-word, a day later it was forgotten about.
Of course.
Jean Boulet, a day later, it was the premier
Yeah.
apologized,
And
said
they
he's
said
sorry,
in French
and
it
forget
has a
about it.
totally different significance.
You know what?
than in
Nothing
You know
sticks.
what? I want to.
No,
you know
I
what?
find
know.
that abominable,
I know.
but
You know
they
what?
say it's no big deal.
Bill, you know what? I want a white person to say that to my face. I want a white person to say to my face, you know what? It's not the same in French and in English.
But
And
they say that.
Yes, but not to my face.
Right.
I want them to say it to my face, and I want them to not have Dany Laferrière as their get out of jail card. So let's have this conversation.
And then they say it's because we're too woke.
Which is not a bad thing, by the way.
Yeah, depends what you're woke about. Yeah. I just want to make another point too, though, about the CAQ in the regions. Is that what's also interesting in this election, or over the years, for people our age, is seeing how many PQ seats have fallen in the regions to the CAQ.
Yeah.
You know, these were PQ seats that aren't going to flip liberal. You know, so the PQ losses over the years are significant. The CAQ has taken over their territory. This territory wasn't liberal to begin with for years. So that's really the big story that's been told for a long time. You know, but when you're saying why didn't the liberals do well in the regions? When's the last time they did well in the regions?
Yeah.
You know,
and you know, for PQ, it's they had a commercial, a TV commercial in French, and the narrator was an older gentleman. You could tell by his voice, and the copy was "Come back home." And I watched it many times. I said, you know, if the voice had been a younger person, said "come" instead of "come back home," it really, I think, would have resonated differently, because they have to renew their electorate, right?
Right.
And so, particularly because you have such a young leader, you can't only try to appeal to people who voted for the PQ in 1976.
Yeah.
You have to appeal to people who weren't born in 1976, right?
But the people who weren't born then don't care about separation anymore. Isn't
You're
that
correct.
the argument?
Yeah.
You're correct.
But by extension, Martine, people are saying had Quebec Solidaire renounced separation, they could have cleaned up in Montreal. There's a huge percentage of young Francos Anglos who would have supported them if they weren't
Did you find that, to Bill's point, didn't you find that odd in the campaign that QS left that part about separation till very much almost the end of the campaign, almost hoping people wouldn't notice?
Right. So I was speaking with Sébastien Dallaire of Ipsos. He's brilliant. And he was telling me that QS it's 1% of QS supporters who care about sovereignty.
Yeah.
So that's why
why include that?
So why include that?
But some Quebecers will always vote for a sovereigntist party. There's still a part of the electorate
But that will never win an election for you, because it's getting to be a smaller and smaller number of people.
Maybe it could have gotten them some votes too. Like, I don't know. I think that's a gamble. That it must be very difficult to figure out how to deal with the separation. Because, you know, the PQ is starting to get, you know, even if they only have 3 seats, there are a lot of people who said the PQ did better than people thought, you know.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
They're not dead yet.
No, that's right. I think the party to watch for is Quebec Solidaire. I think the conversation in 4 years is going to be completely different. I think they're probably learning from a couple of mistakes they've made.
Yes,
I think
like discussing taxes during the election.
That's it. During an inflation, you
Or
know,
650 million.
Right.
But I think we're going to be speaking very differently about QS in 4 years. They have some communication reflexes that are extremely good. Yeah. One of the things they did, and it may seem very small, but believe me, it isn't. They have merch. They have Quebec Solidaire merch, and when they launched,
Wait, they have merch. That's a good. That's a positive.
They have a hoodie.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
But they have T-shirts and they have bags. And when they launched the collection, they said, "We listened to our people. You asked us for this." So that means people who are electors of QS are proud to be elected, and they're proud to show it. And the reason why that matters, when you look at the Trump campaign, that red hat, that Make America
the
Great
MAGA
Again,
hat.
the MAGA hat, first of all, it was very profitable to them, but it's more than that. It created this sense of belonging.
Of course.
And so this is what QS also, I'm not comparing QS to MAGA, obviously,
right.
but this sense
Brand.
of branding, they get it. And that's going to make a difference.
But isn't it okay? So if that's important and that makes sense, they were pretty much. I think we can say they were the party looking to get the young vote. They made it a point. Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois kind of looks the part. Yet at the end, young people still don't come out to vote.
I know. I think that may change, and every election in every country, there's always the same type of conversation. Why isn't the youth voting? You know, you have, for example, in the United States. In 2008, Obama was able to get the vote out, right? Even Macron, in his first campaign, was able to get some of the youth vote out. I think it's a larger conversation. It's not Quebec specifically, and we're going to have to find ways to bring the youth in. They have a lot of opinions. They have a lot of ideas. How do we get them to the booth? This is a conversation we need to have. But I think also with QS, the reason why the conversation is going to change is because parents are paying attention to QS because their children are telling them to pay attention to QS.
My kids said they're voting orange.
There you go. And
They didn't even know the name of the party. I'm sad to say.
That's
They're
what happened
sweet, but
last time. NDP
we're
did
voting
well, yeah.
orange. And I said, "Are you a separatist party?" And actually, my younger son said, "I don't care." It wasn't about that for him, you know.
it was the ideas behind
Yeah.
the party.
Climate change is huge.
Oh,
them.
absolutely, yeah.
That's such
true,
an
too.
issue for them.
Climate
And,
change is huge. I think what I like about parties that are not so on the left, besides La CAQ, is that they're paying attention. They understand that climate change is a priority. That being said, today the reality is I'm for climate justice. I'm making efforts, but I'm not going to vote for a party that makes me feel guilty about owning a car.
Yeah,
You know
right.
what I mean?
There are
that was a
limits.
mistake.
So, that was a mistake, but I think these things are adjustable. I think these things are going to change.
You learn like this then.
Yeah.
But look how many people voted for the CAC with their dismal environmental policies.
Their dismal health.
Still, they got, like we're
Absolutely.
talking about that, but what's the reality? The reality is, wow.
Yeah. I think as electors, we're going to get more sensitive, smarter. I think we're going to pay more attention to climate justice, for example, for social justice, etc. But these things take time to happen. But we're there. We're in this mouvance, so it's going to happen.
So let me ask you to look, as we get set to wrap up, look into a crystal ball.
I have many of those.
Okay. Here's the party. Francois Legault said, I'm going to be more conciliatory, cooperative, going to listen to... I think most people heard
don't-
that in 2018.
Yeah,
and
I don't
didn't
buy it.
then.
That is not
Okay.
his brand.
So what happens in the next 4 years? Who's the party? Because it's almost...
Yeah.
It's never happened in Quebec necessarily before. A party would win 3 terms in a row. What do you see down the road 4 years from now?
In 4 years, I think within the next year, there's going to be infighting in La CAQ and fight for new leadership. I think you have younger members of La CAQ who are going to say, look, we want in, we want some of this, we want more. So I think that's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with the PLQ, and that is, honestly, I haven't had this conversation with Dominique, and if I had, I wouldn't share it here. But I don't know. But I do.
You think she stays as leader? Is she going to do an entire term as leader?
I think so.
Yet Carlos
She's-
Letao,
I know.
you on your on CTV,
Yeah.
said we're going to go into a rebuilding phase. What is that supposed to
Depending
mean?
on what you read into that.
Yeah, I thought that was an odd choice of word. I thought he was going to take it back the next day. He did type of adjust before the end
Sort
of the
of.
night. I don't think the word is not to rebuild. You have a new leader. Let's not forget, she was elected 5 minutes ago, so it's as leader. So she needs time to. I think the party is going to adjust, not rebuild. There's going to the same way other big parties have had to adjust to the times. They will have to do that. And I don't know what's going to happen with PQ. I think they have to renew their base. But I do think in the next 4 years we'll see a different conversation about QS.
We talk about even separation or referendums, and in Quebec, we all know, we're a certain generation, it just comes from the rest of Canada doing one thing to piss off Quebec,
That's right.
and the PQ goes flying up in the polls. It's almost like the PQ is sitting there and just waiting for something to happen, and a lot of things could happen in the rest of Canada.
Although I will
Yeah.
tell you, I don't know if you agree to Leslie's point, I'm not so sure that if that one fight broke out, whether it's over immigration or transfers of healthcare payments, that Francois Legault and the CAQ wouldn't simply say, there's the chance, and they would take the lead and do that.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
I agree.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Once a
Doesn't have
separatist,
to be the
always a
PQ.
separatist.
He's got his
question
cake.
mark.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Why not? And already it's soft
wolf in
separation in
sheep's
so many
clothing,
ways
no?
already, right? What's going on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's.
He's got everything he wants.
The thing I would say though
Except for
about
immigration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing I would say about Quebec politics and Canadian politics, actually, I think for over 4 years we've been looking at the United States and clutching our pearls and say, oh my God, look at them. They're so
big
violent.
time.
They're primates. They're animals.
Yeah.
Newsflash: we're not that different.
Yeah.
We really are not that different, and so I think it's time for us to realize that.
Well, thank you for such a depressing closing
Yeah, on
to
that
this.
note.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Have me over again to speak about something else.
Wow.
I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking we look at the Americans saying, "Thank God we're not like
We're not,
them."
exactly.
Right?
We're the same.
But,
Exactly. God, let's hope not.
Well,
Thank you so much for being here
Thank
tonight.
you.
It's
Thank
been
you
a
for
pleasure.
having me.
Very much appreciate
It's
it.
great.
Thank you, Martine.
Thank you, Martine.
Thank you.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by Empire Gold, paying the most for your collectibles. And remember, at Empire Gold, you get paid right on the spot. And nobody, but nobody pays more for your gold or silver than Empire. Online, empiregold.ca.